welcome to Tub Talks with Damon. My very special guest today is Alex Cheves. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm in a tub.
You're in a tub.
I'm relaxed.
You are an author, educator, writer, sexpert, sex worker, and now you're in my tub in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Have you done any interviews in tubs yet?
This is my first interview in a tub.
How does it feel so far?
Lovely.
Good.
Yeah, it's actually quite relaxing.
I know, it's
like a spa.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you because this is episode 69. Oh, I get to have you as a guest on episode number 69 of Tub Talks. I cannot believe it has already been 69 episodes, but here we are.
Here we are.
Life is moving quickly.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to ask you more about your book, about your life. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, Alex, what do you like most about your body?
Well, I like the parts of my body that I feel like I've had the most control over. So my tattoos, I all personally selected and fussed over.
Can you share a little bit? So I know people can see some of it.
Hard to see, I guess, and I've covered myself in suds.
Bubbles, but can you say like what some of what that means?
So my first one was, I don't know if you can see, it's a feather on the other side of my arm.
So wait, right there?
Right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a feather.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of reasons for why I got it when I first got it, none of which I really remember, but it's still one of my favorites. A lot of them don't have a meaning, some of them do. This is my grandmother's name, who I was incredibly close to, Lois.
Lois.
When I submitted my book manuscript for the first time, I got lust tattooed across my knuckles. I don't know if you can. I'm covered in
so many bubbles. So many bubbles, so little time.
This is the ICD-10 code for high-risk homosexual behavior.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
So I know I have been given that code for the prep work.
If you take prep.
For the blood
anybody who takes prep is branded with this.
Excuse me.
So.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're okay. And this is this sort of, well, this you really can't see. It looks like a tribal thing work is actually the name of my book. You can't really tell, but it actually is lettering. It's My Love is a Beast.
That says My Love is a Beast.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just in like really metal looking lettering, so you can't really tell what it is.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and this is a quote from Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is my favorite movie. Never love a wild
Never
thing.
love a wild thing. That seems the opposite of your entire book.
Yeah.
It's very much about love and very much loving wild things and loving wild,
or
doing wild things.
Trying to love wild things, right? You know.
Oh, okay. Well, gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started getting tattoos?
I was the legal age that you have to be in Georgia, which was 16. I got my first one at 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I plan to be very heavily tattooed.
You want to get more?
Oh, I'm getting lots more.
Okay.
Yeah, there's several already on the books. So.
Can you give us a preview of any?
I can say that on my back I'll be doing something that looks like basically an illustration from those beautiful illuminated manuscripts from medieval Germany.
Ooh.
And I don't want to say.
Okay. All right. When you come back to the bath, we'll show those off.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, next time.
So your book, your essays, first of all, your ability to put emotions and experiences, intimate, private experiences, into words is extraordinary, in my experience. You're able to really articulate so much of, I think, your own and as well as many other people's very private, maybe not even fully conscious thoughts and experiences. Your book talks a lot, well, I think people know it because there's a lot of explicit sexual experiences in there, but the themes that run throughout are also incorporate struggles with spirituality, family, with drugs. So I want to talk about some of those things.
Let's do it.
How did you I mean, how did you decide to become a writer, first of all? How did you decide to begin to write about these experiences?
It's such a hard question. Every writer has asked this question at some point. I don't know if it's a choice. If I had known a bit more about money, I probably would have not chosen to be a writer. It's a difficult career, but through a process of elimination, it was the only thing that was left. I went to school for film. Before that, it was theater. And then even after I switched to writing, I thought I was gonna go more of the academia route and be a teacher. And then I sort of had a crisis at the end of my undergrad and just realized I couldn't go to school anymore. And so when nothing else was left, I realized that this thing that I'd been doing just kind of for fun my whole life, literally since I was 8 or 7, was my career. Wow. And I was just going to be a writer. And I started writing about sex for a blog, and the same blog that I still run. Uh-huh. And a magazine, a queer magazine in Chicago that no longer exists, somehow, and I still don't know how they found my blog, and they asked me to write a sex column for them. And so that helped when I applied to The Advocate for an unpaid internship. They accepted me because I had magazine experience, and then the rest was kind of history. Everybody at The Advocate liked my work, and then I became a regular contributor, and then a contributing editor, and then a columnist, and now honestly I don't really know what I am there, but I'm still writing for those publications like Out Magazine and The Advocate and Plus Magazine and all those mainstay LGBTQ US publications. And that was it.
Wow.
So it all started with the blog, actually. It all started with writing my personal sex stories and putting it on the internet.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great lesson, because you were just being true to yourself. You were just expressing your experiences, your feelings, and they became something that you could actually then practice and do as a job.
Or trying to be.
Yeah. So I want to bring up a couple examples from this book I want to show. First of all, here, folks, is the book My Love is a Beast and My Love is a Beast Confessions. I think for people who know me, who know the show, who are aware of the show, I think this is going to be a book that you will appreciate, because it really does talk about sexuality in such an open, frank way. And I want to, but as we said, other themes as well. Actually, I'm just going to jump to something that I thought was really interesting. So I think people would assume that when you're a sex columnist, and when you've been speaking and writing and practicing sex as you have, that you are this super confident, know everything, that you don't get insecurities, that you don't have doubts, that you could walk into a sex club and just be like, I'm the man, and I've got everything going on. And I really appreciate that you share that you don't have those experiences. You don't feel like you're like superior or entitled. And now, I just want to say to the publisher, because you have no, this is very small.
The text is very small. In the paperback edition, the text will be bigger.
Yeah. So here's a sample from a chapter about going into a kink club where there's a lot of kink play and being considered by someone to be, and you're called a fic, and what that means to you. You mentioned that, and you have a line here, late bloomers often try to make up for lost time, and you're talking about your friend Bear has done so tenfold. There are many nights in our relationship where we both felt like frauds. He and I have always enjoyed sex parties and have had many wild nights in crowds of strangers, but sometimes we stayed in paralyzed, doubting ourselves. We've been defeated when our bodies wouldn't cooperate, or when we were simply tired out. And then every time I've struggled, every time I've had to tell someone to slow down, use more lube, every time I had to clean my cunt again in a public toilet, has threatened the dream I hold of myself as a small, uninhibited fuck god. So those passages really, I thought, were relevant to some of the themes that I know that I think about in my life and that a lot of my friends and community think about. This sense that, first of all, in a public sex situation that we walk in and we often feel like frauds or outsiders or imposters.
Or just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Or just overwhelmed. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. So can you say more about that? Because I think people are surprised that you would have that experience.
Oh my God, no. People seem to think that people who are promiscuous are sexually confident, or that people who have and enjoy sex and talk about sex openly must only do so because they have unending sexual prowess, right? And I just want to sort of state for the record, or for anybody who cares to know, that is, in my experience, actually. What's that sound?
Oh, that's the toilet doing whatever toilets do. Yeah,
okay.
Whatever toilets do. Sorry about that.
That's just not true. Like
Yeah.
I like every queer man I know, I have body dysmorphia.
What does that mean to you, body dysmorphia?
I will never see the muscle. I will never be big enough. I will never be fit enough. I will never have the right diet. And because I'm bombarded by not just imagery, but I live in a community where so many sufferers with the same feelings, because of that, it produces just these, superhuman men. Steroid culture in the gay community, and how that equates to sexual value. I struggle with all of that just as much as I think any out gay man who's sceney and is out and in the scene. I think anyone who spends time in the queer community is gonna struggle with body dysmorphia and gonna struggle with self-image in particular. And that doesn't go away when you walk into a sex club, right? If anything, for that first fleeting moment, or first several moments, I get very overwhelmed. I feel like a fraud. I feel like I shouldn't be there, and I want to be there. And I have a ritual now that helps me sort of get acclimated to the space. I always walk around. I don't immediately start playing. When I was younger, I really utilized drugs to get comfortable in those spaces, as I think many people do. And now I have enough data points, in my enough memory of past successes to say, okay, well, you have a pretty, fair chance. It could fail. And that's always the truth.
Fail meaning what?
It could always go badly. I've had nights where it did go badly,
Badly means
I didn't have good sex, or I couldn't get, if I was like having sex in public, I couldn't get clean. I've even had like disaster scenarios where I made a mess on someone's sofa, or was like.
You mean like you shit while you're getting fucked?
Shit while I was getting fucked, shit all over somebody's dick, shit on the furniture, and which is just the body doing what the body does, right? Like, right. This is our bodies. Everybody's gonna do that at some point. But
that starts to, then we start to frame that as a failure, like a human function becomes a failure in that frame.
Well, okay, maybe a failure is a harsh word. It's an uncomfortable experience.
Right.
And I've had enough uncomfortable experiences to know that it can happen again. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna be as harsh to myself as I was when I was 23. I have enough wins on my shelf. I can be like, it's not my first rodeo. And if I do fail now, if I do make a mess, or I do have a body thing that happens, I can be like, I'm still good at this. I'm an old pro. I've been at it for a while, and I'm gonna have some slip ups. And the ones who are truly experienced, the ones who newcomers, I find newcomers to sexual promiscuous spaces don't respond the same way as people who have had some years of experience in them. Generally, it is the folks with experience who are always the kindest. They're like, sweetheart, it's your butt. This is our bodies. This is what we're gonna do. And that's why as I've aged, my playmates in these places have kind of aged with me, and it has gotten kinder. It has gotten more understanding, and I hope that continues as I get older.
Wow. So I like the way you talk about being good to yourself, being kinder to yourself. That yes, that sometimes sex goes the way we want, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes accidents happen, sometimes shit happens.
Yeah.
We don't have to disparage ourselves or hate ourselves for that, for being human.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of gay men do, and I'm so glad you're speaking to this again, because I think this is how we change this, is by letting people know, pretty much every person who has receptive anal sex has this happen sometimes.
You're gonna shit on someone's dick at some point. It's letting everybody out there know, if you have, it's okay, and you're gonna do it again, and this is your body. It's capable of incredible pleasure. It's the greatest instrument you will ever own. You should enjoy it and use it and explore it and accept the fact that it's gonna do what bodies do. And that very basic fact does not negate or cancel out or destroy any of the pleasures you get from it. And you can, and what I want to tell everybody is that you can still have great sex even if you make a mess.
Say more.
The douching ritual. If you ask men who played hard in New York City in the 80s, nobody douched. This is a new thing that we've ritualized as part of our sex. And I believe it happened entirely in response to AIDS panic. Because you had suddenly many men were dying, and a common feature of AIDS was, you would lose your bowels. And so shit became sort of associated with disease and illness. And so I think, in a weird way, we got this sort of cleanliness obsession, and we wanted sex to be cleaner, and we wanted to be cleaner, and almost like we were scrubbing the shame out of our bodies. And somewhere along the way, a very lucrative market capitalized on douching and shower shots, and there's everything now from butt lotions to butt scrubs to whole scrubs to things that promise to, fiber capsules, all marketed towards gay men,
right.
And men who have sex with men. They're making a lot of money from our fear of something that our body does, just naturally.
Right.
Yeah. And so the douching thing is new.
Right.
And it's not, I don't think it's healthy. I think it is probably here to stay. I don't think we're about to go back to, the mid-80s where nobody douched, but the douching obsession is founded on the assumption that correct anal sex is shit-free anal sex.
Wow.
And I don't think that should be standardized. I think a lot of people think that, but that's not the truth.
Right. And historically, as you said, that wasn't really
the
standard. And by the way, I feel the exact same way about manscaping, because that's the telling gay men that their body hair is shameful and should be removed, and it's making a lot of money selling a lot of products by banking on gay men hating their bodies.
Manscaping still
Certain popular columnists, Dan Savage, advertise for these products on their shows, shaming gay men about their bodies, about their pubic hair, and make money from that. So, and that's still common. It's saying, okay, your pubic hair, your chest hair, your back hair is shameful, so you should remove it in order to be fuckable. And that's still a thing. So we're constantly getting these messages from all directions, literally all directions, telling us that our natural bodies are wrong.
Yeah.
I can tell you, so I started bottoming before you were born. I started bottoming in 1989. And I don't remember ever having a conversation, or it didn't even occur to me to do so. And it just wasn't a thing. Now, where that started to change for me was when I started using PrEP in 2011.
Really?
And started experiencing condomless intimacy. And that was the first time I really started to enjoy penetrative sex without condoms, was 2011.
Yeah.
And that was when I started to realize, wait, I don't want shit to be part of that. When it was about a latex condom, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my best, but worst comes to worst, if there's shit, it's gonna be on the condom. It's not.
Pulls it off.
Yeah. it really started to occur to me, and I can't, which came first, chicken or egg? Like, how in my mind did that get organized? I just remember saying, I don't want to have that experience when it's bareback sex, when it's skin-to-skin contact. I'd really rather not. Understanding still that mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
But if I could do whatever I could do to prevent that is give it that old college try. So that for me was when that started to change.
That's fascinating because that's pretty recent. I mean, I wonder when the general population sort of started to really embrace douching, because I had to be taught that that was something you were supposed to do before sex, and I had to be taught from men who were older. I mean, as is commonly the case, my initial sex partners were some years older than me, and sort of had to teach me how to have sex, right? And so it was already standardized for them by that point. So I wonder how that. To me, it smacks of a very clever marketing campaign.
Yeah.
That's.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it doesn't pass my smell test as. Douching does not pass the smell test as strictly a commercial product.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There's money attached.
There has to be.
And I think again, like manscaping is a should. Douching is a should. Anytime there's a should, there's a commercial benefit. There's a financial benefit.
You're profiting from someone's insecurity.
Right. Profiting from shame.
And think about how much else has been profited from shame.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my God.
Like you said, body weight.
Trying
to get gay men to hate their bodies through their weight.
The gym, the explosion of boutique fitness. My God, like we're literally barraged by businesses and images and ads that all tell us to be ashamed of the way we were born.
Right. So I wrote a book about this back in 2008 called Absolutely Shouldless. And it's about the word should and how it's used both commercially and in mental health to hurt people. But part of that was saying, that there is almost always a corporate cash register going off every time you look in the mirror and say, I look fat today, or I should remove my body hair, or there's something wrong with me. Or if anyone of any gender who starts to criticize who they are, how they appear, someone's cashing in on that.
Someone must be.
Someone's making money from that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to read that.
Yeah, I'll get you a copy.
Please.
So it's this idea. So part of why I'm doing these bathtub interviews is to say, if we're ever going to change that paradigm, and if we're ever going to go forward in this world as a community that's healthier and happier and more joyful in our bodies and in our minds, it's by having these conversations. It's by thinking about these things critically, at least challenging them. My model of shouldless is not like, okay, it's a harm reduction model. It's not abstinence. It's like you might challenge a should and still decide you want to keep it. Mm-hmm. But at least then you're deciding that instead of someone deciding it for you.
Someone's setting that standard for yourself. Yeah. I mean, great example, I fully participate in gym culture and steroid culture and all this other stuff, knowing that it's toxic, right? Like I know I have to. All my engagement with it has to be at some point, I have to willfully check, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do get swallowed up into that, into some of those really harmful ways of thinking. But I never want to just be blindly making decisions for my body based on what people tell me I should do. I want to be, I like body change. I like body, what's the term? Body modification. And I want to be able to do whatever I want to my body. And if that means sometimes participating in these imagisms of our culture, then that's and so be it. But
then it's you.
But it's me.
You have the agency to decide yes or no.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of agency, another theme in the book that comes up quite a bit is the theme around consent. And what consent is, what it isn't. Now this is a really, in the atmosphere, this gets to be controversial, but I think that you and I see sex in a way that means that sometimes boundaries get crossed. Sometimes experiences get pushed to the limit in a way that wasn't planned. In the very first chapter, you discuss an experience of being double penetrated for the first time, and just
that I didn't ask for.
Yeah. And yet, from what you said, right, it was a positive experience. It's not something you came away from at least from what you've said, it's like, oh, now I'm so traumatized and I'm a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk more about that. The book has experiences where you aren't necessarily giving full consent and yet experience great pleasure. What?
You gotta be careful how loud you say that.
Well, you say in the book, so.
That a non-consensual experience can still be beautiful and even meaningful, but in my life, it was. Now, I cannot sit here and say that is, I am a cisgendered male, I have privileges that others do not, but I still have autonomy, and in some cases my consent was still, disregarded. But, I do wonder if I would have come away from these same experiences if I was in a profoundly different, socioeconomic class from the people who I was having these experiences with. But, yeah, consent gets tricky. I'm being published in an upcoming book called Unsafe Words.
Mm-hmm.
It's being edited by Dr. Trevor Hoppe.
I love him!
Yeah.
I love Trevor. He did a great book about decriminalizing HIV, and he's welcome to be in this tub. I've actually reached out to him about
He's amazing.
So get over here, Trevor.
Come on, Trevor. Yeah. It's lovely. The water's warm.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can say too much about it, but basically it's called Unsafe Words, Queering Consent in the Me Too Era. And my essay is about how, at least in certain spaces, in certain parts of my culture, which is the sex culture of certain subsets of men who have sex with men, we do allow for, let's just say, we do allow for situational consent.
Yeah.
We do allow for a kind of consent that isn't directly stated and communicated and gotten throughout the experience. And the reason why that matters is only as far as it matters in law, right? Mm-hmm. I am nervous about efforts to quantify consent legally as something that you obtain verbally before and throughout a sexual experience. While I think that that's well-intentioned, it will, if officialized, it will outlaw much of the sex that I have. When I go into a dark back room, and just by virtue of being there, I have waived a degree of consent, and that's just the unspoken rule of these places. And if I'm in a sex club, in a sling, with a blindfold on, legs spread, the purpose of that environment is to say nothing and to be an open invite and to have people come by, and that is anonymous sex. Something I do all the time. Something I did a few days ago in Montreal, and while well-intentioned, people who think that consent is always a discussion that you have before and throughout sex are people who are simply not aware of how some queer sex lives are lived. They're not aware how mine is lived, and I mean it matters because gay men are somewhat accustomed to being outlawed.
Right.
It's not exactly new territory to have our sex lives literally criminalized.
And of course, that intersects with what Trevor writes about is criminalizing HIV.
Yeah.
That you've been living with HIV for 10 years, and in some areas of this country, that is still criminalized.
That's true.
I mean, sex as a person living with HIV is still being criminalized in the South and in some other states. So it is that constant. I agree that seeking to how can we punish gay people, especially gay people, for fucking?
Because they're terrified of us.
Yeah. Say more. What's the terror?
If I have one lesson for the future generation of LGBTQ kids out there, queer kids out there, it is this. It's great if we're on TV. It is great if we have representation. But society will never not have a scapegoat. They will never not have a punished class they will never designate a minority as being somehow unfit to have the same rights as everyone else. And if you give them enough, if you allow their slimy laws to pass through and allow the people who hate us to get into power, they will round us up. Like we absolutely terrify them. We defy, just through our queer relationships, our queer lives, we defy the standard of moral correctness for so many major dominant world religions. We disrupt their God, we disrupt their religion, we truly scare them. Because, and with every bit of visibility and happiness that we have and every win we get, we further frighten them. And I think that what has changed in this country is not necessarily that the needle has shifted in the public consciousness, but I think that gay men are a harder bully to bully now. We have money and influence in media, and we have the polls saying that everybody likes us now. And I think that it's much easier for people to make the scapegoat undocumented immigrants or people of color or trans women, but that is not guaranteed to remain, you know. And while we should be fighting for everyone who is a punished minority, who is not allowed to be the you know, a first-class citizen, we can never be lulled into this complacency that we are in some way, that gay men or even just LGBTQ people, that we are in some way protected, that the needle has ever fully moved in our favor, because we are a small percentage of the population.
It's so interesting because I think of it too, like we scare people, but when I say we and I think of the terror, I think it's the terror of the kind of sexual fucking that we talk about, the free penetration of anal pleasure that we celebrate, that you and I celebrate, a lot of people we know celebrate. That is what I think is so terrifying to straights. Paradoxically, there has been such increase in societal acceptance in the US in the last 25 years because of sanitized versions of our lives. Will and Grace and Ellen and the Obama passing marriage equality in 2015.
If you act straight, you're fine.
Right. So it's this weird thing for me. It's like, okay, in some ways I'm more accepted than 30 years ago. In other ways, I wonder, because the kind of life I live and the sex I have is still
you're only more accepted now if you're Neil Patrick Harris. You know,
right.
If you're having like 2 kids and a house and you know, because then you're giving them codes of familiarity, and all the only work they have to do is replace the gender of the partner, but they're still seeing the marriage and the white picket fence and the nuclear family and this sort of fiction of the essential economic unit of power in America. They're still seeing that, and they're just replacing a wifey for a husband. And that's not my gay life. That's not your gay life. And what the queerness of queer culture is not only different from that, it directly, even I think in times, antagonistically challenges that paradigm. Yes. And that's what they hate. Fascinating.
Now, what's also interesting to me is that within the gay community, the greatest resistance to PrEP, as well as the message of you equals you, which means undetectable is untransmittable, someone living with HIV cannot transmit HIV when they are undetectable. The greatest resistance to these messages have come from the moral police within the gay community, in my experience. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't even know how, like the straight folks that I know think that these are all great ideas. And this might just be because I'm like in New York and California. But the outrage, the violent threats that I received for talking about PrEP all came in within the gay community.
Really?
Yeah. So it's this interesting, because again, sex, freedom of sex. Now, I do think within the gay community, it was mostly in people that were still traumatized and from HIV and AIDS, mm-hmm. people who had lost friends and lovers. It was mostly that group of people who had associated semen, sacred spiritual semen exchange with death, and just couldn't undo those synaptic lapses in their brain.
Which is undo that. And which I don't think that, you know, that population I don't think ever will.
Right.
Well,
they've come, so in 10 years, a lot of people have moved their thinking around this. A lot of the Larry Kramer, not everyone, but a lot of the group that was following Larry Kramer blindly, that was opposed to this, are now like, oh, wait, science is actually a good thing.
We still have the Michael Weinsteins of the world, but...
Yeah. Well, the incels are still going to be miserable, you know, because they're incels. So, but again, that idea that fucking is so threatening to certain people, and I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, it's just anal sex. It's just
sex.
sex. It's not that threatening. Sometimes it's not even all that great, but sometimes it's beyond power.
That is so important. That is so important to say, because people who, God, I wish I knew who said this quote originally. This does not come from me, but well, I mean, it's not really even a quote, but people who tend to have such strong opinions of sex, it's the sacred or the profane. They either think that sex is the best thing in the world, this like holy thing that exists on this platform, or it's this thing that exists in the gutter, that is the most disgusting, depraved. And I think that most sexually active people will tell you that that's not really either. A lot of times it's just kind of,
It's all right.
it's all right, you know?
Sometimes it's extremely powerful, other times it's mundane.
Sometimes it's great, but you know, I mean, as someone who has a lot of sex, I mean, it's literally my job, I can say, I have had desserts that are better than sex.
What kind of desserts?
I have had meals that are better than sex. And so, which all that means is I can place sex on it is just one of many physical experiences, many things I can do with my body, one of many experiences I can do with someone else. It's not necessarily always the best, it's fun, you know, but if it isn't fun, there's always other things to do, you know, like I've had hookups where I was just like, you want to go get food? You know, and it's great. Like, sex is not as good or as evil as you think it is. It is just sex, which means it can be wonderful, it can sometimes be boring, it can be frustrating. People don't talk about that enough. Sex can be very frustrating. It can be, you know, it's work. There's a learning curve to doing it, and unfortunately no one teaches you how to have sex now, especially if you're queer. So I think that, you know, a lot of sex, especially for queer people, is just like trial after trial and error after error and learning and practice and frustration and working through that frustration. So, you know. As
a sex worker, do you find yourself teaching or doing a fair amount of teaching about all of these things?
I would like to more.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, just by the work you're doing, are sometimes people looking to you because they don't know their bodies or they don't understand how to enjoy anal pleasure and want your help?
Not as much as I wish they were, because that's the version of sex work that I would like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not a sex therapist. I don't have the licensure, so I cannot call myself a therapist.
Mm-hmm. But by default, pretty much a lot of what you do.
But a lot of what I do is like that. I think for good sex workers, a lot of what they do is much akin to sex therapy. Yeah, and I will say, since the pandemic, something has shifted. Nowadays, it is less of that. People are looking to just fuck. People are the more educational, what I would consider like sexual healing experiences, for whatever reason, have kind of tapered off in COVID, which is honestly the exact opposite thing that I thought would happen. But yeah, now I'm getting more hires just to kind of bang and go. I don't know what has pushed that, but I feel like the most meaningful experiences that I have with clients are when they want to bottom for the first time and they've never done that, or they don't even know how to clean out. I have had clients who I've stood in the shower with them and helped them clean out. You know, I'm honored that they've let me share that vulnerability with them.
What advice do you give if someone's watching this and says, I want to know, I don't know how to clean out and I'm too embarrassed to ask anybody? Is there anything you would advise them?
Well, I mean, now there's a lot of really good articles online that kind of go through it. I mean, not to boost my own articles, but I've written quite a few articles on how to bottom, and if you go to my blog, lovebeastly.com.
And the link will be right there below the tab on YouTube. Love Beastly.
Love Beastly is a place where I answer sex questions online, and it is the blog that started my career. I still run it. I still try to publish every week. And by this point, I've been running the blog now for over 10 years. There's a lot of questions about douching and my personal douching regimen that are on there that I can more easily refer to. And there's just so many, I've answered that question so many times. There's now quite a bit of information on the blog about how to douche. as well as like supplements, like probiotics. I have a really sensitive tummy,
Yeah.
so you know my regimen is a lot for some people. Like I don't do caffeine, I don't do a lot of sugar. Like I have to, but some people don't. You know, some people their piping is. I know people with golden perfect holes who have
Wow.
to douche for 5 minutes and they're good to go, and it must be great.
I'm jealous.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I
And it changes for me. It changes as I get older. Like
It
my
has
body
changed
is sensitive. What foods I'm sensitive to.
Mhm.
What atmospheres. When
Well,
we're traveling, it's like
your
things
tummy,
change.
Your tummy changes.
Yeah.
Your piping changes, and yeah, but I in general I tell people to start with the article. Message me. I'm available on social media. And I would say distrust the guides on the internet that tell you to put a lot of water inside you. However much water you're using, it should probably be less. I think that in most cases, most douching guides are overkill. You don't need to be over douching. It can be very harmful for your body. In fact, the only circumstances in which I think that someone needs to do like a deep clean is if you're doing very large toy play, you're doing very deep fisting, or maybe if the guy has like a monstrous 13-inch dick. But even then, like if you're taking that dick, then you know how to clean that deep. I think that for most kinds of sex, including fisting, and I will even say this because I'm a fist bottom, and people are shocked at how little I clean for it.
Really?
It takes me less than half an hour.
Less than half an hour for a full fisting session.
For a full fisting session, yeah.
Wow. So people can read your regimen for that on the link. I just forgot what it was, but it's going to be right down there.
Askbeastly.com.
That's fascinating, and I'm going to read that. And again, for me, this is an ever ongoing dialogue with people I know and with my own body, because it's always changing. I can't always figure out why sometimes, you mentioned earlier, like sometimes it's easy, no problem. Other times, an hour later, it's like, why is my body?
May not.
It's like my body's still saying no, and I can't fully predict which is which, and that's very frustrating
Well, 'cause
sometimes.
you can't.
Yeah.
The body, because the body's not an algorithm. You can't plug in the right stuff. I'm fully convinced of this, and there are wellness experts and health experts all over the world right now who will tell you something different. But I do not believe that the body's a formula, that you can plug in the right food and the right regimen and the right time and the right stuff and spit out predictable results. The body is an animal. It responds to your mood and your sleep and your environment and your trauma lives in the body in ways that you don't even know about. So the body's, you have a relationship with your body, and I kind of see mine as a wild animal. I can't always tame it. It's unwranglable. Sometimes it behaves, and sometimes I can get it to. Sometimes I can lasso it, and sometimes I can't, and that's okay. It's because it makes it really fun. My body, God, after all these years of fucking, my body is still a mystery to me. I still am discovering it, and that's so fun.
Wow.
It's so nice.
That's well stuff. That's beautifully said. Yes, and I appreciate that. Again, because our bodies are changing, and instead of having shame about that or fear about that, we can just embrace that. We're learning.
Yeah, you're dealing with a wild animal. You don't know what it's gonna do next.
Yeah, for real. Wow. Okay, so I have like a million more questions that we're not going to get to.
Sorry.
No, because a few things I bookmarked, but I think we've talked a lot about the sex positivity. One thing we didn't get to that I'll just say, because you at one point you're talking about an argument with your father, and there is a line: his fury was right, his fury was love, and his love was a beast. And I think that's the first time the word beast is used in the book, is in reference to your father. And I was interested in asking about that. You then talk more in the book about your conflict with your father, but I thought it was interesting that the title of your book is My Love is a Beast, and the first time the word beast is applied in the book is in reference to your father.
Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise. I mean, the name of the title of the book comes in its full form later.
Yeah.
In a moment that I just love. It's my favorite part of the book. When the title reveals itself is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's my favorite moment of the book. But my relationship with my dad is very complicated, as I guess a lot of queer men's relationships with their fathers are. Writing a book is like therapy, and in the process of writing it, I sort of faced head on for the first time some of the physical violence that he did when me and my sister were younger. It probably, even in ways that even he would not really acknowledge now if they were confronted about it. And then certainly the more emotional and sort of dogmatic religious hatred and fury and dogma that so pervaded my upbringing. But I'm a lot like him. I have many of his characteristics. We're very similar people. We're smart. He's a good speaker, he's a good writer, and he's a thinker. He really is a critical, analytic thinker. And he made me who I am in so many ways. I wouldn't be who I am without him. He comments on the world. He's never been a neutral observer. He is engaged and active with the world and current events. It just so happens that his perspective, his lens, diametrically opposes mine. And he has a good argument for everything that he believes, and I respect him deeply for it. We do not agree on anything. We do not see eye to eye on anything, but there's one man out there who I deeply respect who can present a very coherent and valid and well-argued reason for his perspectives. He's not just parroting party lines or, repeating Bible verses. He's a thinker. He's a very brilliant man, and I respect him very much. I cannot agree with his worldview. I absolutely, in fact, I am at times appalled by his worldviews, but I know why he views them. He and I are bullheaded, obstinate, headstrong. At our very worst, we are both perennially convinced of our own correctness, which is something I've had to work on and something he'll never work on. But he made his equal and opposite in me. Yeah.
He made his equal his opposite.
Yeah.
That almost sounds biblical.
Right?
When you say that.
Yeah, I am the dark inverse of my father.
Fascinating. Yeah. Has he read the book?
I believe not. I have told him that he probably will not want to. And at the end of the day, I can't control what they do.
Yeah.
I told them they know that I write about sex. They knew that I was a sex writer before the book came out, and I told them one day before the book published, I said, so I'm writing a book. Since you know what my career is, you can deduce what the book is about. You probably don't want to read it. And I was like, I was very sympathetic. I was like, look, if I was a parent, I probably wouldn't want to read this book about my kid. I don't think any of it is hateful. I don't think I demonize them, but I tell the truth.
I think it's really fair. I think you portray them as, like you said, diametrically opposed in many ways, but also very loving and compassionate, but yeah, sometimes violent. But I think you give him a lot of fair coverage.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
He seems like at his core, a loving person.
Oh, for sure. He's just love makes people very different.
Yeah.
Well,
and so my last topic, and that leads us right into sort of the last idea that I wanted to ask you about, was religion, because a lot of his ideas, your father's ideas, seem to be religiously based. And throughout the book, you talk about feelings and thoughts about God as used by Christians in Christianity, how that term has been leveraged against you, against us faggots, rebels, and we talked about that a little earlier today. And then there's a prayer at the end of the book that you actually read in Montreal last week, when I got to see you read. I guess I'm wondering, at any part for you, do you feel like a relationship with any kind of higher power is something that would be something you would want in your life, or something that might add meaning into your life in any way?
Sorry, am I questioning you?
No, you're great.
Sorry. Yeah, well, how do I say this? Oh boy, this is a tough one. As I kind of hinted this in the book, but I am on paper an atheist, because if you had to ask me, factually, do I literally think that there is a literal God that spit the universe into being? No, absolutely not. But only because if a being did exist, he or she or it must be so unspeakably cruel that it would be offensive to my being to believe in such a thing. I mean, I refuse to believe that some kind of cosmic dictator just allowed the AIDS epidemic to happen, or allowed the Holocaust, and some being that was powerful enough to do all this sat up there and did nothing. So, so through basic logical reasoning, God must be diabolical or doesn't exist. Those are the only two facts. Those are the only two possible realities. Either there's nothing watching over us, or there is that's presumably so powerful to create us, but not powerful enough to stop our greatest suffering and mass hunger and world poverty and blah 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 blah. So I choose to be an atheist, not necessarily because it's the most instinctive position, but because it's the kind of reality for me to believe in. Because I just simply can't believe in something so monstrous as God. But I have never fully I was raised religious, and so people who are raised religious, we still we never fully let go of that bent, right? That orientation, that how many accidental prayers have I let slip out over the years? And if I have a relationship with God, if God exists, then we must dispose of him as soon as possible. I am antagonistically, violently opposed to God, and that is my relationship with him. I am anti-God.
Okay. At any point, has there ever been an interest in, or sort of the Eastern ideas, the Buddhist philosophies about not God as a punitive entity, but more like a loving, abundant energy that's actually in us, not this thing around us?
Well, that gets tough, right? Because at some point you have to, at some point it becomes you're playing word games. The way to test the theory is to agree first to its terms. So we must, if we're going to tout an idea of God, then we must first agree what God is, which in itself is very, very difficult for human beings to do, right? So I am basing my God on this idea of a being that is but that is its own separate entity, separate from human beings and separate from nature, but exists within nature, that is somehow omniscient and omnipotent. Now, that's the only concept of God that I was ever raised with. Now, I explored, as you read the book, I explored all these other different religious ideas and concepts. There are some Eastern philosophies that I think are beautiful, but they redefine that definition of God. So then it gets difficult to test it, right? Because as long as the definition of God, the noun, gets sort of retweaked to fit a different world perspective, then it becomes something very difficult to prove, right?
Right. All right. There's no way to prove it.
Yeah.
It's just a subjective experience.
Yeah. And there are times when I think that might be nice, but but I run on a hot coil of rage, and I don't want to fully give that up.
I get it.
So,
I get it.
yeah.
I guess just for me, in my 30s is when I started learning more about the spiritual ideas, non-religious based ideas about higher power, new thought. A lot of new thought has a lot in common with the therapy I practice, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is that all of our experience, most of what we experience here is based on what we perceive here. And where that works with me really well is in that realm of feeling like you, I, all living beings carry the light of spirit, whether we call it God or Buddha or Allah or Cher or Madonna, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We carry spirit, and where I think that really makes a lot of sense to me, both experientially and sexually, is in the realm of penetrative sex and semen exchange, that we are like exchanging parts of God when we share our bodies with other people.
That's fascinating.
And that to me has just always been like, yeah, that feels right. I can't prove it, I can't defend it, I can't
But it's
do it, but
meaningful.
it's meaningful, and it certainly kind of enhances that idea. That's why I talk about sacred semen exchange, that not only is it fun and pleasurable, which it is, but I think it's also a way of,
It's a
sharing
spiritual practice.
spirit, and that's even that fly that's like running around the tub is a part of spirit, and it's here, it's alive.
Yeah.
So anyways, I just wonder, because at a certain point for me that started to become a source of peace and pleasure.
Yeah.
And perhaps someday that will feel right, or maybe not. But I was thinking about that when I was looking at the book. I'm just like,
it's fascinating. Like the closest thing that I felt to religion, true religion, like in all the good version of that term, or perhaps spiritualism, was on a crowded dance floor with gay men. I mean my God, the Black Party. If I've ever had a religious experience that felt real and authentic, it was that, and so sure that I don't know if I believe that there's any paranormal and that's the wrong word, because now paranormal people think I mean like ghosts and stuff, but I truly mean like above normal or invisible, or I don't know if I believe that there's anything more happening in that experience beyond just a sense of connection. But a sense of connection, it's not a small thing. It's not, even if that's a very base chemical animal thing that happens when people feel connected and close and share space and share contact, it is still a beautiful and rewarding and necessary and vital experience. And if some people call that spirituality, it's certainly the closest qualifier to it that I've had in my life.
Beautiful. Alex, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time to sit in the tub and talk with me about sex and spirit and why sex is so terrifying to so many people and your thoughts. I just really value that so much. Thank you.
This is so much fun.
This is great. So you mentioned if people want to follow your work, you mentioned again, we're going to post it. It's going to be right down below, but you can say again the links.
So my blog is askbeastly.
askbeastly, right down there.
I'm also on social media for now. I'm not very good at Instagram, but my writer is. I'm better at Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. I do have a Facebook page. My personal Facebook account is a different name because I choose to have one layer of privacy. I didn't do that when I first published the book. My account and my Facebook page were the same name, and I was getting a lot of friend requests from readers, and I had to be like, all right, I have to actually only be friends with people I know because this is getting a bit much. But I do have a Facebook page that you can follow where you will be informed on my speaking events and reading engagements and
the next book.
And I do have a website. Not a lot of people know about it, but it is alexcheves.com. Heads up, that might change. So I generally refer people to Twitter for now. As it turns out, it is confusing when you publish under the name Alexander and your website is Alex.
Ooh.
People don't like that. So I have had to change my URL. Now when you actually go to my website page, it says Alexander, but the URL says Alex.
Wow.
And that one fact has caused
Wow.
so much confusion. Like I have had to tell when I do reading events or speaking events or whatever, and I see the poster, it's completed, and they're sending it out, and it says Alex on it, and I'm like, that's not the name. Oh no. So now I'm doing I'm just everywhere it's gonna be Alexander. So
Alexander.
Alexander.
So just
Alexander
like, and
Cheves.
again, this book, I highly recommend. You can get it wherever books are sold. It's on your website. It's on, the big ones, the small ones. But get this book. Check it out. I really think for people who have watched the show and appreciate these ideas about sex, about spirit, about empowerment, about questioning the oppressive paradigms that try to tell us to harm ourselves and hurt ourselves, will appreciate that book and some of the themes in there. Thank you, Alex. If you like this interview, subscribe down below, share it with your friends, share the book, and thank you for watching 69 episodes of Tub Talks. If this is the first time you're watching this, just press Tub Talks with Damon. The link will be down there, and you can see the rest of the 68 that came before this one. Ooh, that came before this one. That sounds good. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.